Good morning, Kuhner country. Okay, my friends, as you know, today is Wednesday, and the Senate is still in session. They're on the verge of going for recess for the entire month of August into about the second week of September. President Trump is urging, practically pleading, John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, to not allow the Senate to go to recess. By the way, who the hell needs a 6-week vacation? I mean, they're going to go away essentially on a 6-week vacation. Who vacations for 6 weeks? On top of, how many vacations have they had this year already? I mean, I lose track. They work at least half of the year, if we're lucky. They have more vacation days in the year than they actually have work days. Okay, so they want to go for another freaking 6 weeks off. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because President Trump is now asking, pleading, demanding, don't go anywhere, stay, do your job, and pass the Save America Act. Especially now, as we're about to enter one of the most important historic midterms in our country's history. In other words, it's time to pass a law that will end voter fraud, entrench photo voter ID, and force people to show proof of citizenship before they're allowed to register to vote. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this is there is now a band of Republicans led by Senator Mike Lee. And I want to give a lot of credit to him. He has been a warrior on this issue. But now joined by Senator Rick Scott, Senator Jim Banks, Senator Young from Indiana. So the numbers are starting to grow who are saying, I'm not going to leave the Senate. We want to stay. We don't want a vacation. We don't want to go for recess. We want to stay and work on the Save America Act and finally get it over the finish line. Thune is resisting this. He wants to go on vacation. Why does he want to go on vacation? Because he knows by the time they get back, there's not enough time left to pass the Save America Act. Ipso facto, the Democrats then will have a clean shot at stealing the historic midterms. Why do we need the Save America Act? I've given you the reasons, a million of them, over the last couple of months. Let me give you one more. And this, frankly, doesn't surprise me. I have been saying this almost since the day he was elected last year. This Ugandan Muslim communist, who is now the mayor of New York, and by the way, doing everything in his power to polarize New York, to divide New York, to drive that city into the ground. Well, according now to election auditors, listen now to this, they have discovered that over 230 votes that were cast in the 2025 New York mayoral race were fraudulent, illegal votes. In fact, a stunning number, listen to this, 7% of all the votes cast, 7% came from people that don't exist. What do you mean, Jeff? Jeff, I'm sorry. What do you mean they don't exist? There's no names. There's no addresses. There's no social security number. They're phantom votes. They're phantom votes. They found a massive batch of votes that came from people outside of New York City. Remember, this was the New York mayoral race. You have to live, you have to have residence in the city to vote. A, you have to be a citizen, obviously. But B, you got to live in, you got to live in Boston to vote in the Boston mayoral race. You got to live in, Chicago to vote in Chicago's mayoral race. Well, in New York, same thing. You have to actually live in the boroughs. You have to live in New York City to be eligible or qualified to vote. No. They also found a large chunk of people who allegedly voted for Mamdani don't even live in the city of New York. They found that illegal aliens had voted. Non-citizens had voted. And so, and by the way, you need to hear this. About 2.2 million votes were cast in that electoral, that mayoral race last year. They've only done an audit of 1 million of the 2.2 million votes. So they still have another 1.2 million to go. They're basically halfway through the audit. And they've already found at least 230,000 fraudulent votes, illegal votes. Now, you're going to say, Jeff, what does this have to do with Mamdani and whether he's legitimate and whether this was an above-board election? Well, that's more than Mamdani's margin of victory. Think about that. More illegal votes were cast, fraudulent votes were cast, 230,000, than Mamdani's margin of victory. He won the election by 207,000 votes. If you remember, he defeated former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who ran as an independent. He beat him by 207,000 votes. And the Republican Curtis Sliwa finished a very distant third. So the point is, now we know for a fact, without the shadow of a doubt, that there were more illegal votes cast for in this election than the margin of victory of Mamdani. Now, as I said on X last night, as I posted on X, in my mind, there's no question that this election was a stolen election. No question. Now, and to show you how certain I am and the reason why I'm making this claim, it's not just the incredible gap and discrepancy between the 230,000 fraudulent votes. And remember, they still have over 1 million more to audit. So I think you're going to see about 600,000 votes were illegal and fraudulent. Okay? But let that go. Let's just stick to the 230,000 votes. I remember on election night, I said, I can't believe that New Yorkers would vote to cut their own throats. I can't believe that in such a heavily Jewish city, where you have more Jews living in New York than any other city in the world, with the exception of Tel Aviv, that this rabid, naked, pro-Hamas, vicious anti-Semite could ever win a free and fair election. Well, the New York City Board of Elections, the New York State Board of Elections, both boards have now admitted that there are 230,000 fraudulent votes. And when pressed, can you confidently with certainty say that Mayor Mamdani was the legitimate winner in the 2025 mayoral race, that he is in fact the true winner and the rightful mayor of New York City? They cannot give you a yes. And the reason why these boards cannot give you a yes is because there were more fraudulent votes cast than the margin of victory. Now, this is now going to open up, I hope, a massive political, legal, constitutional crisis. It should. The media is desperately trying to suppress this, but it now calls into question Mamdani's election. It calls into question his legitimacy, and I'm telling you, they stole it. And one of the reasons, or one of the ways, forgive me, that they stole it was they have now overwhelmed New York with third world migrants that Joe Biden let in, where Mamdani's people and the DSA went into these areas and they were handing out ballots or mail-in ballot applications like it was candy. And they just said, sign up and vote, sign up and vote, sign up and vote. And that's how you get so many non-citizens voting. Now, what it shows to me, beyond the shadow of a doubt, crystal clear, we need to pass the Save America Act. We have to purge the voting rolls. We have to ensure that only citizens are registered to vote. And you have to show photo voter ID and limit mail-in balloting. Another bombshell. Yesterday was the Fauci diary bombshells. Well, now it's more of the election integrity or stolen elections bombshells. So you want to talk about voter fraud, and this almost tees it up for why we need the Save America Act. So we now have election auditors have now uncovered stunning evidence that, as I said in my opening monologue, that the Muslim Marxist mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, who was elected in 2025, defeated Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa. He won by 207,000 votes. Well, listen now to this. According to the New York City and the New York State boards of elections, so both the New York City and the New York State, they cannot state with any certainty that Mamdani won the mayoral election. Now, why? Because election auditors have looked, as I said, they've examined 1 million of the total 2.2 million votes that were cast in the election. So they're not even halfway through. But what they found already, listen now to this, 7% of all the votes or voters that voted in the election were non-existent. There's no names, as I said. There's no address. There's no identity. There's no social security number. There's nothing. They're phantom voters. So 7%, literally, they don't exist. There's no record of them. 6% of those who voted had fake social security numbers. 10%, as I mentioned in my opening monologue, that's 10% of all the voters, didn't even live in New York City. No, I'm not talking they have a second residence, a pied-à-terre, as I'm going to get to that soon, because Mamdani is taxing these non-primary residences. I mean, nothing. They don't have an apartment. They don't even have a cardboard box on the street corner. They don't have a condo. They don't have a house. They got nothing. They don't live in New York City. Many of them don't even live in the state of New York. So just out of this preliminary examination, and remember, they still have 1.2 million votes to look at. Okay, they're only at 1 million. They identified 230,000 illegal votes, fraudulent votes, illegitimate votes. That's more than the margin of victory. Mamdani's margin of victory was 207,000 over Cuomo, who finished second. Now, what this means in plain English is that it's obvious that there was rampant voter fraud that is now undeniable, that, again, we're looking at hundreds and hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens and non-citizens voting, and the very likely probability, in fact, to me, it's almost a certainty, that Mayor Mamdani is that Zohran Mamdani is an illegitimate mayor. And that, I don't know what you got to do, have a new election, a recall. I don't know what you do at this point. But the fact of the matter is that Ugandan Muslim communist, Marxist, who's now slowly destroying New York, cheated his way using massive voter fraud to be installed in power. Now, it's not just Mamdani. again, to reinforce why we need the Save America Act. By the way, this is the mayor of New York. This is the biggest city in the United States. If they can steal an election for the mayor of New York, what can't they do? Remember the story I talked about up in New Jersey with New Jersey Governor Mikey Sherrill. And she came out Democrat. She came out and claimed recently that because whistleblowers were going to blow it, they were going to go to the media. She came out and said, "Oh, we found a software glitch. The software vendor that helps us register people, at the Motor Vehicle Commission through motor voter registration. We found that 6,600 non-citizens, illegal aliens, were illegally registered to vote. And about 400 of them actually voted. Now, it turns out that the Trump administration has said, okay, fine, can you give us the names? Send us the voter roll with the 6,600 non-citizens that were falsely or fraudulently registered to vote, and give us the names of the 400 that you say actually voted. Mikey Sherrill refuses to hand over a single name. Why does she not want to hand over a single name? If this is all above board and this is an honest mistake, she would hand them over. No. It now turns out it wasn't 400 who voted. It was thousands who voted. And it also now turns out that the software vendor has said, hey, it wasn't a glitch. It was deliberate. Okay, scandal. I mean, there's voting fraud scandals now everywhere. And it's obvious. Our election system is clearly corrupt. Our election system is broken. Democrats are rigging and stealing elections at the local level, at the state level, at the congressional level, at the presidential level. And that's why there's, to me, the most important piece of legislation, nothing else comes close, is the Save America Act. And when you have 84% of Americans, 84%, white, black, brown, Asian, men, women, young, old, gay, straight, Republican, independent, grassroots, rank and file Democrats. I mean, I know the Democratic leadership is obviously dead set against it because many of them have been using voter fraud and stealing elections. That's how they're in power. So of course they're going to be against the Save America Act. Voting fraud and these corrupt election machines, look, they most likely now propelled Mamdani to the mayor's office in New York as an example. So if they can't steal, if they can't cheat, if they can't engage in massive fraud, then they're done. They're cooked. They can't hang on to power. They can't win power. But many ordinary rank and file Democrats, they don't want this kind of corruption. Now, you've got 84% of the American people that want this legislation, this bill passed. And yet John Thune won't move the needle? Every Democrat in the Senate is against it. Every Democrat in the House is against it. And you've got rhinos doing everything in their power to block it. And now they're desperate to go on recess on a 6-week vacation, knowing this will effectively bury the SAVE Act to have any kind of an impact before the midterm elections. Now, I want you to listen to New Jersey Governor Mikey Sherrill. So remember, the whistleblowers were going to blow the whole lid off this thing, that there were thousands upon thousands of non-citizens who were illegally registered to vote, and that they had been voting in previous elections in New Jersey. She didn't want the whistleblowers to tell the full story, so she preempts them by holding a press conference. This was last week. And she says, oh, yeah, we found it, but it's a glitch. It's a glitch from the software vendor. So when you go to the motor vehicle system or motor vehicle commission, as it's called in New Jersey, their version of the RMV or the DMV, and you ask for, you get your driver's license, they want to register you to vote. And then they ask you, are you a U.S. citizen? She claimed that they pressed no, 6,600. They just pressed no. But that the glitch, the error, as she put it, quote unquote, in the software suddenly turned the no into a yes. And that's how they were put on the rolls. And she said, and I think we found like 400, she says, who actually even voted. So Trump, his DOJ, rightly says, okay, fine. We're going to take your word for it. Give us the names of the 6,600 non-citizens. Can you just hand them over? Seems like a very reasonable, fair request to me, right? Listen to her answer. This was her yesterday. Roll cut 12, Mike.
The Trump administration is seeking, I believe by today, the list of non-citizens who are registered to vote and the approximately 400 that did vote. To what extent will your administration comply with the Trump administration's request in that regard?
As I have said, I am not in the habit of turning over private identifying information of the citizens of New Jersey. This federal government is weaponizing the government against individuals that disagree with them. They weaponized my private data against me in my election, and so I am working to protect people and their private data here in New Jersey.
Okay, now notice the hacks. Those are all Democrats, Democrat activists. Many of them are probably ballot harvesters and ballot traffickers. Okay, they're involved in all this corruption. So they're like, yeah, don't hand them over. Yeah, we keep stealing. This is the Jersey way. All right, so now all of a sudden, she's concerned about privacy? Seriously. I could name you all the ways Democrats violate people's privacy, but just so that just to get rid of it, the argument right out of the gate. As Sandy said to me in the pre-show meeting, and she's right. Well, the IRS already has all your information. Like, I don't know what this woman's talking about. The IRS has your name, your date of birth, your social security number, your address. They've got everything. So what private data are you allegedly protecting? No, you're protecting the illegals. And you're protecting and you're stonewalling an investigation. Because let me tell you the dirty secret. And it's out. It wasn't just 6,600 that were illegally registered. Now they fear the real number is going to come out. And you're looking at probably 40, 50, 60, 70, 80,000 were illegally registered. That's number one. Number two, it's not 400 who voted. Local media is now saying they're looking at thousands who voted. Illegals who voted. So she lied about both numbers. But this is the biggest lie. The software vendor, please look it up. Please don't take my word for it. Okay, they're called Idemia. It's a French firm. It's a French software vendor, the ones that she's blaming for the illegal voter registration. IDEMIA. That's the name of the vendor. I guess it's Idemia. They said they came out with a statement saying she's lying. They go, we can prove it to you. We can show it to you. It's a bald-faced lie. Every time somebody pressed no, I am not a citizen, we registered it as no. There was no glitch. There was no software error. There was no mistake. They press no, it somehow, becomes processed as a yes. And they're suddenly added to the voter rolls. No, they said it was registered as no, and they were not put on the voter registration rolls. It was the Democrats who then got this information from us, and then they themselves said, no, we're going to take all these no's, and we're going to move them to a yes. It was the Democrats who forcefully, deliberately, consciously, in premeditation, took all of these thousands and thousands and thousands of non-citizens, and they illegally put them on the voter registration rolls, claiming they were U.S. citizens. So you show up to get a driver's license. Remember, New Jersey's handing out driver's licenses to illegals and non-citizens. So all you got to do is show up. They give you a driver's license. Then they say, would you like to register to vote? And you go, yeah, sure, why not? And so they say, would you like to register to vote? Yes. The next question, are you a U.S. citizen? You click no. Most of them clicked yes. That's how they get the illegals to vote. They lie. But those that are honest, they go no. Well, what happened was they weren't just automatically put as a yes. It had nothing to do with the software. The software was 100% effective. You pushed no, it was registered as a no. They came in, the Democrats did, and put all those no's, these illegals, and knowingly put them and registered them on the rolls. Now, final point, and then I'm going to go to the phone lines. This is why they don't want to hand over the voting rolls. Because here's the ultimate dirty secret. They just want all these illegals registered on the voting rolls. They don't need the illegals to vote. Because they can have Democrat activists vote on their behalf. So all they need is just say, we've got 10,000 potential voters. If the illegals don't vote, it doesn't matter. We'll get somebody else who maybe is an American citizen or who has an American address or has a legitimate social security number, and we'll just have that person vote on their behalf. Period. That's how they do it. That's how they do it in Massachusetts. That's how they do it in New York. That's how they did it, by the way, with Mamdani. That's how that crook stole that election and became mayor. That's how they do it in California. That's how they do it in Illinois. And ultimately, that's what they want to do across the entire country. So if you want to know why Democrats are going to fight the Save America Act with everything they have, and they're willing to bribe or blackmail leading Senate Republicans so that they betray their own voters, but guarantee that they never get a vote on the Save America Act, now you know the full story. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, bombshell now developments. Election auditors now have found over 230,000 fraudulent votes were cast for Zoran Mamdani, the current mayor of New York. That exceeds his margin of victory. He won by only 207,000 votes. The question now is, did he steal the election? I think the answer is obvious, but I want to hear from you. And in a very suspicious development, Democrat New Jersey Governor Mikey Sherrill announced yesterday that she will block the release of over 6,000 non-citizens to the Trump administration who were illegally registered to vote in her state. And if you caught the reference she made in the cut that we played, she's referring to these illegals and non-citizens as quote-unquote citizens of New Jersey. What is she hiding? That is now the question. What is she hiding? Larry in Arkansas. You're going to kick us off, Larry. Thanks for holding and welcome.
Jeff. Good morning, sir.
Hi, Larry.
So, we passed a law up there before I moved to audit Massachusetts. How'd that audit go?
So far, they're blocking it. Nothing. Not a
So
single penny has been audited.
So an actual law was passed to get these chuckleheads to do the right thing, and they still wouldn't. Why are we surprised that Mickey is blocking everything?
Larry, what's your theory? What is she hiding?
The truth, plain and simple, that they keep stealing elections. You know, Mondami, I mean, I would have gone either way on it. Yeah, they stole it, or yeah, you had enough idiots up in New York to vote for this communist who's also a Muslim to show, we're not, remember when, I might be getting a little off path, but remember back after 9/11, liberals went out of their way to say, we love Muslims. That's why I wouldn't have been surprised, because 25 years later, look, we love Muslims so much, we're going to vote one in. So, that, like I said, that could have gone either way. But you have a whole cabal. It's still essentially deep state, and you have these liberals who want to hide the voter rolls, block everything. They're fighting tooth and nail in court to get activist judges to block Trump and the Trump administration from getting exactly what you said. Everything that the IRS already has, they're trying to block because they know they're hiding the real numbers and the real truth of all the fraud and all the illegals registered to vote and are voting. It's insane.
Larry, I've got to ask you the $64,000 question, because I really think you hit the nail on the head. It's obvious to everybody in New Jersey. It's now increasingly obvious to everybody in New York City. And it's really becoming obvious to people around the whole country. Our elections are corrupt. Voter fraud is rampant. The Democrats cheat and the Democrats steal. Yet everybody seems to be, not everybody, I mean, this audience is obviously very passionate about it, but so many Americans, frankly, even Republicans, even conservatives, are just very lethargic and complacent. It's almost as if we're beginning to accept, stolen elections and election corruption and fraud as just the cost of doing business. Just, part of everyday life. It happens. That's all. Like, just deal with it. Yep. Democrats steal elections and illegals vote. And, you shrug your shoulders and I got to go to work and put food on the table and pay my taxes. I got no choice. Are we now becoming so complacent as a country that we're just going to look away at, to me, one of the greatest crimes you can commit, which is to nullify and steal the votes of real, legitimate American citizens? In other words, are we on the road now to becoming a third world banana republic? What say you, Larry?
I think the fatigue is setting in. I don't mean giving up. I mean, it's slow. It's slower than it should be. But between this voter fraud and revelations of the deep state lying to us, people are getting tired of it. And they can only take so much. But the question becomes, how bad has it gotten? I'll give you an example. Do you know the name Mark Rosenbloom?
No, I haven't heard of it.
Okay, so he is now the former data chief of INS. He was the one who was in charge of the keeping track of all the deportations. If you look at the mainstream media, he quit. No, he was fired. Why was he fired, Jeff? Because he was lying about the deportation numbers. Not up, down. He was reporting 25% less deportations than we actually have to demoralize the administration and to make it look like they're not doing their job. It's nonstop trying to destroy the morale of the country. Between the CIA, between Fauci, between hiding all this stuff. It's a concerted effort, and there's plenty of rhinos, guilty as charged, to do the same thing, to keep us demoralized so they can stay in control. Not only is John Thune trying to take, it's not 6 weeks vacation, He laid out for the rest of the year, the entire calendar year to January 1st, he wants 68% vacation time for the rest of the remaining calendar. That's how much time he's trying to take off.
68%. You mean starting from today to January 1st. So over 2/3 of the days. From here, what is it? August, September, October, November. 5 months. So basically he wants what? Three months? More than 3 months. 3.5 months of the next 5 months to basically be vacation time for these clowns up on Capitol Hill. Am I understanding you correctly, Larry?
Exactly, because they don't want to pass his agenda. Here's even more nefarious, Jeff, and I thank you for the extra time. Do you know that how many recesses and stuff we've had since 2025? How many recess appointments Trump has made?
Now, how many, Larry?
0. Why? Because John keeps at least 1 or 2 people working to keep it from being a complete recess to prevent our president, who was overwhelmingly voted with an agenda, from passing that agenda. And it makes it look like Trump isn't keeping his promises. This is how nasty they are. When is enough? That's the question, though. When are Americans going to be tired of this crap?
Yeah, Larry, I'm in the wrong line of work, man. I'm serious. Forget all the money. You become an instant, like what gazillionaire. Forget millionaire. Now you're 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 million easy once you become elected to Congress. Okay, it's like a license to print money. So never mind, you become basically an oligarch just by getting elected. But holy mackerel, the vacation time. I've never seen anything. Honestly, it's better than welfare because you can say you have a job, even though you're never working. You get to wear a nice suit. You go in front of cameras once in a while. People call you senator or congressman, like you're an important person in the community. So not only are you lining your pockets, you can actually claim you have some kind of a job, even though you're not working practically most of the year. It's I got to say, it's an incredible gig. I mean, it really is. And it's all on our dime, Larry, huh? Your money, my money, everybody listening to this show, huh? We're working ourselves to the bone, and they're living off our money. It's just, hey, after do you laugh or you cry, Larry? Larry, thank you very, very much for that call. Holy mackerel! So for the next 5 months, they've already penciled in 3.5 months vacation. Sorry, you laugh or you cry? I mean, boy, they're really doing the people's business, huh? They're really representing you and me, huh? Boy, they're fighting for us every day. Ken in New Hampshire. Thanks for holding, Ken, and welcome.
Good morning, Jeff. Boy, are we so close to big wins. Oh, my. I got a big question for you.
Yes, Ken.
Larry just brought up one of the topics. John Thune. Why is John Thune the way he is? Do you know?
Well, I mean, if you listen to people on Capitol Hill, he's cut from the same cloth as Mitch McConnell. He was groomed by McConnell. He is owned by the donor class. And he is going to become, in fact, is in the process of becoming, but he is going to become a fabulously wealthy man and politically very connected with very powerful friends. And when you look at a guy like him, who's an absolute mediocrity, he's from the Dakotas. Everybody who knew him said this guy was going to go nowhere in life. And all of a sudden, he's at the pinnacle of the Senate, and he's doing the bidding of the globalists and the swamp. And so John Thune will be at least worth $100 million bare minimum. So you know what it is to be worth $100 million? Like if you're a genuine businessman, the kind of quality product you have to put out, the kind of work, blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice, hours put in, the talent you have to have, the skill, the drive, the ambition. And this freaking loser, and, you know, if you look at him, the only talent he has, and that was all Mitch McConnell. Make sure you wear a $2,000 suit. Make sure you always have the proper tie. Yesterday at the Lindsey Graham Memorial, he wore black. He knew to wear a black tie, unlike some of the other senators who are so stupid. When you go to a funeral or a memorial, they have like a red tie or an orange tie, or he knows to wear black. And look at his face. He goes to a spa every single week. He gets a facial. He's always properly tanned. His hair is perfectly coiffed. And he knows every lobbyist in town. That's John Thune's specialty. But I'm just telling you what Capitol Hill is telling me. You tell me what you know, Ken.
Jeff, all that you stated is absolutely true. But there's two key elements to learn now and for the future as to who we choose for our leaders, particularly in the House and Senate. One, North Dakota. Do they have a lot of people in North Dakota?
No.
Two, Chamber of Commerce. What does the Chamber of Commerce think about immigration?
Well, they're for open borders, and they want amnesty for illegals.
And that's why Thune is doing what he's doing. Because a small number of people can heavily influence him to give him what you just described, coming from a small state. And this is a vestige of the old Republicans owned by the Chamber of Commerce. Gee, was Mitt Romney owned by the Chamber of Commerce?
Oh, lock, stock, and barrel.
Is Donald Trump owned by the
Absolutely
Chamber of Commerce?
not. No, they can't stand him.
Aha.
No, Ken, what you're talking about, and you're completely right, as usual, you're completely right. They used to be called country club Republicans. That was the term. George H.W. Bush, your Mitt Romney, John Thune, John Boehner, Mitch McConnell, all these guys. Those are the country, known as country club Republicans. They're owned by the Chamber of Commerce, the donor class. They do the bidding of big business, big tech, big pharma, and they want cheap labor. And they want as many illegals in the country as possible. They are for open borders. And they want illegals eventually to be legalized, because, they want these people to work for them and not be deported. And so that's why John Thune has been given his orders. You must stop Trump's agenda at all costs. And that's why everything Thune has done since the way Paul Ryan did it in Trump's first term. He's basically the Paul Ryan now of Trump's second term. You're there to sabotage. You're there to block. You're there to obstruct. You're there to undermine. You're there to play stupid. You're there to, okay, we'll get it done. Yeah, sure, Mr. President. Yeah. You lie to his face, and then you stab him in the back. And, he doesn't want to, it's so obvious he's doing everything in his power not to pass the Save America Act. And the way he's trying to get out, to be honest, if it wasn't for that, big hearing today between Rand Paul and Fauci, they'd already be out of Washington. But now we, the people, because we've put so much pressure on him, and again, I've got to say this, Senator Mike Lee has been a hero in this. He bucked Thune. Thune has threatened him again and again, Senator from Utah, Mike Lee, a Tea Party conservative. And now you've got other Republicans, one after another, are joining Mike Lee. And Mike Lee is saying, no, I'm going to lock the Senate down. So you're going to watch. The big thing after Fauci today is going to be now Mike Lee. And Senator Mike Lee is saying, okay, fine. You all want to go on recess? You want to go for 6 weeks and basically kill the Save America Act? Fine. I want everybody to vote. See, normally it's just a hand vote. Okay, are we going to go on recess? Are we in recess? Yeah. Okay, bye. Everyone's off to Hawaii or Key West or the Bahamas or wherever they go. Now Mike Lee is saying, no, we don't want to go on recess. We want to stay throughout the month of August to finish the Save America Act. And he's now being joined by a band of rebels, Republican rebels. And so Mike Lee is saying, fine. Thune is saying, well, no, we want to go on recess. So Mike Lee said, okay, we're locking it down. To go on recess, you have to vote. A vote, an actual vote, not a hand vote, an actual, written vote. So you put your name to the vote. So, and this is going to forget the Democrats. They hate the SAVE Act. They're all going to vote against it. But now every Republican is going to have to put their name down. And this is the question. What's more important? Going on vacation? Another one? I believe it's their 6th or 7th one of the year for 6 freaking weeks. Or end voter fraud before one of the most important historic midterm elections in our history. So 6 weeks Bahamas or save the country. 6 weeks Bahamas or save the country. And now Thune is pissed. Thune is pissed. Because you can say whatever you want about South Dakota, North Dakota, that they're very patriotic. And they love this country. And they don't want voter fraud. And if they get wind of what Thune is actually doing, I'm telling you, they're going to send him out on his rear end. So now Thune is caught between a rock and a hard place. And we're going to see what's going to happen. And look, Trump has been a warrior on this. I think it's 3 Truth Socials a day. He's meeting with Thune. He's berating Thune. He's on Truth Social. Stay. Don't go on vacation. Work on the Save America Act. Do your job. He's doing everything he can to shame Thune to not go on vacation and stay, keep the Senate in session and pass the SAVE Act. So, Ken, we're going to find out. It's within a couple days. Everything shall be known in a couple days. Ken, as always, thank you so much for that call. But no, it's very, very clear that there is a cabal, a treasonous cabal of rhino Republicans or country club Republicans, whatever you want to call them, never Trumpers. It's Thune. McConnell, by the way, had to show again proof of life a couple days ago because he's another one who's an anti-Trumper and is against the SAVE Act. But he's apparently he's still rehabilitating. According to him, no heart attack. Remember what he said? No stroke, no heart attack, no concussion, just bruises. He apparently had a fall. This was over a month ago, a couple of bruises, but he's still in rehab. So he's still in Kentucky on rehab. So he's a no. Susan Collins, niet, no. Murkowski, niet, no. And the question now is Thune going to vote no? J.D. Vance is on standby, 50-50. He'll break the filibuster. Sorry, he'll be, not the filibuster, forgive me. 50-50, he'll be the tie-breaking vote. So, vacation or Bermuda? What do you think is more important? 617-266-6868. By the way, let me ask all of you, okay? And you work way harder than they do up on Capitol Hill. It's not just that they're taking vacations all year round. Is that even when they work, you're lucky if you can get them to do a 7-8 hour day. If they actually work an 8-hour shift, an 8-hour day, they're exhausted. They need a massage. When was the last time you ever had a 6-week vacation? Straight, 6 weeks. Mike, when was the last time you ever had a 6-week vacation? Sandy, I'm just curious. 6 weeks? You've never had a 6-week vacation. Ever. Me neither. Mike said summer when he was in college. Lucky you, Mike, because yeah, that's what I was going to say. I thought, didn't you have a job? And he says, oops, I misspoke. No, I worked in the summer. Same thing with me. So even in the summer, during summer break, I worked. I've never had a 6-week vacation in my entire life. I don't know what that means. Middle school. Summer and middle school, Sandy's saying, for both her and Mike. Yeah, that's about right. I'm serious. 8th grade, maybe, yeah. Boy, those were the good old days. Kathy in Rochester. Thanks for holding, Kathy, and welcome.
Good morning, Jeff.
Hi, Kathy.
You know, it really makes your blood boil listening to this. What a bunch of losers. It's unbelievable. They really don't care about us at all. All they care about is themselves. But, you know, the one person that does work and does not take 6 weeks vacations is guess who? DJT, the man that everyone wants to crucify. That man works for us, and he works his tail off. You know, it's just amazing. Everything that we have been told, you know, about everything they tell us on the media, it's all a pack of lies. They just don't tell us anything that's true. I mean, it's just the media has become so despicable that, you know, anything out of their mouths is just an absolute lie. From, you know, and I'll start with food insecurity. And, oh, the economy is bad. People are hurting.
Kathy, can you do me a favor? Because you're on a roll. I don't want to cut you off. We're up against a hard break. So before you really get going, okay, we're going to go to Kathy in Rochester. But before we do, Wednesday, 7:20-ish, you know what that means. Truth or troll. Take it away, Mike.
And now, America's favorite game show, where you get to decide on the Kuhner Report. This is Truth or Troll.
All right, today's entry for Truth or Troll comes from Senator Bernie Sanders on CBS, where he is asked if he regrets supporting Graham Plattner in his candidacy for Maine Senate. Here's what Mr. Bernie had to say.
You were an early supporter in Maine of Graham Plattner. You helped him rise. Do you regret not acting earlier to call for him to drop out, given the warning signs? Would that have given you a leg up here with Jackson?
No, I don't think so. When we heard the serious allegations made against them, I wanted to get on the phone. I wanted to talk to him. I did. I asked, along with virtually all his supporters, that he should get out of the race, and he did.
All right, so that's interesting. Is it? He doesn't regret it.
He's such a liar.
It really is crazy. So, is he telling the truth here, or is he just?
No,
I don't even know. Trolling, messing around. I don't know how you.
No, he's trolling. He's BSing. That's what he's doing. He's BSing. First of all, he didn't, I got on the phone with him and I had a conversation and I said, no, you really need to get out. No. He kept backing him and backing him and backing him. No matter how many outrageous scandals kept erupting, it didn't matter what this guy did or what people said about him. Bernie kept saying, I'm sticking with him. I'm sticking with him. I'm sticking with him. Until, the last one, which was a liberal who said he raped me. And they looked at the poll numbers and they said, no, Plattner can't win. So let's just use this rape accusation as an excuse to bury the guy. So he's such a freaking liar, So now it's like, the moment I heard about that Nazi tattoo, I just said, that's a bridge too far. He's such a liar. I got to tell you, man, this guy, honest to God, he really does belong in the old Soviet Union. So, no, I think he's trolling, but that's me. I want to hear from you. So, Bernie Sanders said that when he heard about all of Plattner's flaws, let's put it this way, he had a conversation with him, and that's when he told Plattner he needs to step down. Is he A, telling the truth, or B, trolling? And trolling in this case means BSing, lying. I think this guy's trolling all the way, but that's me. You can vote on our webpage, WRKO.com/Kuhner, WRKO.com/Kuhner, N is in national ER. You can also vote via X. Again, I was very active on X last night. My handle there, all one word, at the Kuhner Report, at the Kuhner Report, Kuhner. You want to know how, when a Democrat is lying? Like, you want to know the tell? Jeff, like, okay, so how do I know when a Democrat's lying? The moment they open their mouth. The moment the mouth starts moving up and down, that's it. That's the tell. They're lying. Kathy in Rochester, we're going to pick it up with you. Kathy, you were saying, what do these people on Capitol Hill do? It's disrespectful. They're not doing the will of the people. Hell, they're not even willing to work 6 months of the year. That this is getting to the point now where they're just insulting us and insulting us to our face. Please pick up where you left off.
You're right, Jeff. And they're just taking advantage of us. You know, they're really just taking advantage of us. And this is not what our forefathers wanted when they established the U.S. Constitution, established our government. They wanted people, just regular people who are going to work for we the people. And, you know, I think we need to kind of get away from having a lot of these people, elected officials who have a law degree and become politicians. I think that could be part of the problem. We need to elect some people who are just regular, down-to-earth, blue-collar workers to get in there because they can relate to what we, the people, are going through. And you're right. So many small business owners, they work there. They put their heart and look at what happened during COVID. They were demolished. They lost their business because of that evil little troll. But that's another point I just want to get to. But I was just saying, the things they talk to us about, food insecurity. Let me tell you, when I go out and I look around, I don't see any food insecurity. I see people who are so overweight, and what they really need is they need a 6-month diet. And then people are hurting. Are you kidding me? They just had the folk festival and jazz festival in Newport, Rhode Island. It was sold out. The place was packed. You go into a restaurant today, you can't even get in. It's jam-packed. People are spending money left, right, and center. So, they just want to make Donald Trump look bad, so they come up with all these lies about what's happening in the economy. The only thing I will say is gas did go up. Someone was telling me yesterday it went up like 30 cents a gallon. But once he fixes that mess in Iran, hopefully gas prices and heating oil prices will come down. But then the others is conspiracy theory, Russian collusion, believe in the science. Which brings me to the real fact that I called you today, is that I hope everyone can pick up the phone and call Rand Paul's D.C. office, because I'll tell you, after listening to your show yesterday, 4 hours of your show, I got goosebumps. Especially that woman who called from Worcester Polytech Institute to talk about the 7 students who committed suicide. I mean, that broke my heart, and I think it broke everyone's heart.
Oh, you're completely right. Look, Kathy, today we're going to find out what Rand Paul is made of. Just super, super quick, because I want to go back to the phones. By the way, a couple lines are open if you want to jump on. 617-266-6868. Kathy made the point, and some of the previous callers, Larry made the point, that everything that's being done right now, especially from the media, but from the deep state, from the Democratic Party, from so many levers of power, is to demoralize us, is to confuse us, is to dishearten us, is to confuse us. And that goes back to it's literally a Soviet technique invented by the Russians. That's why people say, well, why do you always use Russian when you say, disinformation or misinformation, misinformatio? Because those are literally Soviet Russian words and strategies that they invented and that got picked up by our regime, especially under Obama, and it got worse under Biden. And our own deep state picked it up. And so the way communists were able, or the Soviets were able to control and confuse and disorient, and that really is the key word, disorient, their population, was to keep throwing misinformation, disinformation at them all the time. Lie after lie, half-truth after half-truth, propaganda after propaganda, what you're seeing from the mainstream media on a nightly, consistent basis. Lie about Trump, lie about the food security, lie about the real state of the economy, lie about the war in Iran, lie about the borders, lie about deportations, just constantly give out dis or misinformation to grind you down, to disorient you, to confuse you, and ultimately to break your will, to demoralize you. For you to say, look, just forget it. I'm done. You can't beat them. There's nothing you can do. And just, let me throw in the towel. Now, it worked for a while under the old Soviet Union, but in the end, the people rose up. You can only lie to people for so long and get away with it. And, Fauci is example, to me, he's example A. He lied to us. And they tried to break us during COVID. He lied about it coming from that COVID came from a wet market, from an animal, a bat, a rat, a monkey, whatever. He lied about that we were secretly funding gain of function research. He lied about the vaccine. He lied about how severe COVID was. He lied about the mask mandates. He lied about the lockdowns. Remember, everyone forgets this now. He was the one that came out and said, 2 weeks. Remember that? We're just going to shut it down. 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks. Like we're just going to pull the plug on the computer. We're just going to unplug for 2 weeks, kind of reboot the system, and then it's all going to be good. And 2 weeks turned into 2 years. So that's what they do. They lie. Now the big lie is that we have, quote, the most secure elections in history. Remember that? Oh, how dare you even mention voter fraud or the issue of election integrity. Nobody's got more secure elections than we do. Well, guess what? Now we're finding out they're registering thousands of illegals, non-citizens in New Jersey, and now they're trying to block and prevent Trump from getting access to the voting rolls. Now we're finding out that Mamdani most likely stole his election. That at least 200,000 fraudulent votes were cast in his election for mayor, and he only won with 207,000 votes. We're finding voter fraud now is in almost every election. But they got to keep lying and lying and lying so that they don't pass the Save America Act. To the point, and this is my fear, that people now are being so disoriented, so battered, so exhausted, so demoralized by these lies that they keep peddling, that having fraudulent elections, having rampant voter fraud, stolen elections, people now are just, it's like living in an Eastern European dictatorship. That's what they do. Shrug your shoulders. What can you do? Nose to the grindstone. I got to work, pay taxes, pay my rent or my mortgage, put food on the table, and I'm just a dispossessed peasant. What else can I do? I'm not a citizen. I'm not an American with rights. This is no longer a constitutional republic where they work, our politicians work for us. We don't work for them. And one of the most sacred things in any republic is the right to vote. Because when you have fraudulent votes, you are negating, you're canceling out votes of people like you and me, legal American citizens. And on top of it all, notice, in the old days, meaning just, 10 years ago, they used voter fraud to put up Democratic hacks in power. Now they're not just putting up Democratic hacks. Now they're putting up, say, Muslim Marxists like Mamdani. Or, these Democratic Socialists of America, DSA communists. So, or, again, Muslim Marxists like Ilhan Omar. So now they're putting up revolutionaries, anti-Semitic, anti-American, anti-Western revolutionaries who want to literally overthrow the entire American system. So now voting fraud has become even more dangerous and, to me, more important than ever that we confront it and that we defeat it. So stay in, do your job. You've had enough vacation time to last you 10 years. Okay, already this year, you've taken so much vacation time, you're good for 10 years. No August recess, no freaking vacation. You stay until you pass the Save America Act. That's what Trump is demanding. That's what the country is demanding. It's what I'm demanding. Agree, disagree. Andy in Milford. Thanks for holding, Andy, and welcome.
Good morning, Jeff.
Andy.
Hey, Jeff. 4 points. Number one, we've now got to melt down the phones up on Capitol Hill and make it clear to all these clowns you are going to pass the Save America Act. And we're not going to budge on this point. Point number two, Team Trump, the president, is going to have to be ready to declare a national emergency. This needs to be a plan B. And there's enough evidence on the board now to just get this in under a national emergency, a national security emergency, especially given the China influence. Point number three, all the senators up in the Senate that are fighting to prevent the Senate from going in on recess, they need to start a serious movement in the Republican caucus to get John Thune out as Senate Majority Leader and get somebody else in there that can take care of business. Final point, Jeff. If, God willing, in New York State, they can elect a Republican governor this fall, because this would never happen under Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York State would have the authority to remove the mayor of New York City, and certainly, given the revelations discussed this morning and other things, they would have ground to do so.
Andy, bang, 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 bang. All four. Absolutely hit it out of the park. Andy, look, I can only piggyback and add to what you're saying. So far, the Republicans now, Blakeman is the man now that I think is going to be the Republican nominee. Blakeman now is trailing Kathy Hochul by only 4 points. That's almost within the margin of error. The Democrats are panicking in New York. A Republican may win this November. We shall see. But now she's facing a really stiff challenge from Blakeman. So if he wins, I think at a bare minimum, he's going to at least order a full-scale investigation into Mamdani's election. And when the public finds out how many hundreds of thousands of fraudulent votes were cast, undeniably, it's going to shatter his legitimacy. I think it's going to shock many, many New Yorkers. Now, your other point, and I think it's an absolutely dynamite point about John Thune. Senator Mike Lee is not just leading this rebellion to keep them in session and not go on vacation. Mike Lee now publicly, it was about maybe 3 days ago, publicly came out and told Thune, if you don't have what it takes to keep us in session and get the SAVE Act passed, I'm almost directly quoting him. Okay, it's slightly, and I just mean slightly off topic. Sorry, I'm battling a bit of a cold, so I had to cough there. It's slightly off topic, but it's very important related to what we talked about yesterday, what is going to happen later today with the explosive testimony of Fauci and in front of Rand Paul's committee, the Committee on Governmental Affairs and Homeland Security. But it goes to what we're talking about overall, how we are being constantly systematically lied to. So I want you to hear this. Please, all of you, you need to stop what you're doing. Trust me. You've got to hear what I'm about to tell you. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. last night announced a bombshell revelation about Fauci, saying, I know for a fact, and we have the evidence to prove it, that Anthony Fauci, after he got his public COVID jab, suffered a direct adverse side effect. In particular, listen to this. I'm going by what RFK Jr., he's got the smoking gun evidence. He said, look, we have the documentation. Fauci can't deny it. He apparently suffered what's called a pulmonary infarction. And you may ask, well, Jeff, what's a pulmonary infarction? Infarction, forgive me. It's usually, I'm looking by the medical term, it's injury or death of a tissue, either in the heart or in the lungs, resulting from inadequate blood supply, especially as a result of obstruction of local blood circulation. So in plain English, and that is one of the side effects that has been known for people who have taken the jab, is that they either get damage to their heart or damage to their lungs. Well, Fauci suffered tissue damage, serious damage to his lungs. And he hid it from the public. Deliberately hid it from the public. And as RFK Jr. said, what he ended up doing was he hid it from the public, and then he went to an elite private medical facility. I'm talking top dollar. And in secret, in the shadows, he had to get himself taken care of. He had to get serious treatment. And once he got serious treatment, and basically they helped, relieve the problem and the situation, he then came back and then continued to say that there were no side effects. Even though, he was told repeatedly and he saw the evidence that there were side effects, undeniable, again, with a minority of the population, but still, these are still millions of people who are getting bad side effects, but that he himself had suffered an adverse side effect. And this son of a bee went out and continued to lie that there were no side effects, even though he himself had tissue damage to his lungs to the point that he could barely function. And so he had to go to for the uber rich, a super fancy private medical clinic. I'm telling you, that's going to be brought up today at the hearing. And then after he came out, public statement after public statement, there's no side effects. Look at how they lied to our face again and again and again. This guy deserves to be in jail, man. Like this, I'm telling you, this is like enough is enough. How the hell do you do that? How does this guy still have a medical license? How does he still have a pension? Now, the SAVE Act, the Senate is scheduled to go to vacation, i.e. on recess, by tomorrow. Okay? Tomorrow, John Thune wants Washington empty. So right now, the Senate is about to end its session. Okay, we're less than 24 hours away. And the SAVE Act has still not been passed. And so the Kuhner Country poll question of the day, sponsored by Mario's. Mario's quality roofing, siding, and windows. Now, I'm not asking should it be passed, because to me, 1,000% it should be passed. And I think the overwhelming majority of this audience wants it to be passed. I'm asking a different question. Will the Senate pass the SAVE Act? Not should it. Will it? Can these Republican rebels, this band of rebels, along with real pressure now coming from Donald Trump, the president, can President Trump and these Republican rebels, can they force Thune to stay, in session and get the SAVE Act over the finish line? So the question is, will the Senate pass the SAVE Act? A, yes. B, no. You can vote on our webpage, wrko.com/Kuhner, wrko.com/Kuhner, Kuhn, N as in Nancy, ER. You can also vote via my handle on X, at the Kuhner Report, all one word, at the Kuhner Report, Kuhn, N as in National, ER. Look, I'm really praying and hoping for a yes. Nothing I want more than yes, but that's my heart. My head, I think the answer is going to be no. I don't think they're going to pass it because I think there are too many powerful interests, vested interests that don't want it to be passed. So I'd probably vote B. My heart's with A, but I would probably vote B. But that's me. I want to hear from you. 617-266-6868. Who do you want me to go to, Mike? Nick in Weymouth. Thanks for holding, Nick, and welcome.
Well, good morning, Jeff.
Hi, Nick.
How you doing, kid? Another facet of this, the SAVE vote, one thing that Thune has been doing all along is keeping McConnell out of the fray. Beshear, the governor, is making noise trying to force McConnell to put up or shut up. Either you can function or you have to go. I don't think he'd get rid of him, but he could start a furor by going against the rule and asking for a special election, right? But what McConnell has done and what Thune has done is a long time ago, I believe that McConnell is incapacitated and cannot do the job, right? And it's so selfish of him, but on the other hand, it's heinous, however you pronounce that word, of heinous, of Thune, to not have already asked for a special election, whatever, along with the governor, months ago, right? Or two months ago, right? Because it's worse than we thought. So now you could have had in place a senator who would have had a good head start towards special election had he been appointed already temporarily, like Lindsey Graham's sister, right? She's now an active senator. She'll be running. You could have had someone in place. So now we don't have a 53 majority. We have a 52 to 47 majority, right? And of course, he was one of the 3 or 4 that were always voting against Trump. Anyways, I get that. You could have replaced him, but he's still sitting there. As for what happened in New Jersey and elsewhere, well, I'd say the ball is in the court of the Attorney General. Are they going to go after anybody? Are they going to prosecute anybody? I'm sure they can get some underlings who worked under the former governor who made all this happen, right, and just put them away. And that sends a signal and then go after other states as well. But you're right. This is totally incapacitated what we had hoped had been honest elections. It happens all the time. Thank you very much for your time, Jeff.
Thank you, Nick. No, you're completely right. Look, let's be honest, okay? As the French would say, entre nous, among us girls. If this was a Republican governor in a Republican state, and it was 6,600 votes, voters that were illegally registered for Republicans, and we find out not 400, but thousands ended up voting at the bare minimum. Democrats would be asking for heads to roll. This would be wall-to-wall saturation coverage. It would be on every nightly news broadcast. CNN would be covering it round the clock. MS Now, lead front page in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Associated Press, Reuters, Boston Globe. I could go on. It would be the scandal of the century. The governor would go to jail. The lieutenant governor would go to jail. The attorney general would go to jail. There'd be so many people going, look, the reason why I say this with such confidence, look what they did to the J6ers. And half of them were innocent. I'm talking old ladies on the steps of the Capitol. Okay? Old ladies who did nothing wrong. They were just there. They're not even inside the building. They're outside the building. And they got 10, 12 years for, quote, being domestic terrorists or, quote, insurrectionists. So can you imagine if they were actually stealing votes and stealing elections? Oh, my God. Ay, ay, ay. But when you do it to Republicans, or especially to MAGA conservatives or MAGA Republicans, what's the problem? Suddenly, what's the big deal? Okay, just very quick. This is from 781. This is regarding Fauci and what was revealed yesterday, again, shockingly, by RFK Jr. So here it is. Remember that Fauci took the jab and got a pulmonary infarction. So this is what 781 writes. Jeff, a pulmonary infarction is a serious medical condition where a part of the lung dies because it loses its blood and oxygen supply. It is most often caused by a blood clot in the lung, known as a pulmonary embolism. Well, that's what Fauci suffered. And he hid it, and he covered it up, and the medical establishment covered it up. And this guy hightailed it to one of the most exclusive, elite, private medical facilities in the entire country, all in the dark of night. And it took him apparently a while to get well. And then he came out and then lied and told the public that there were no side effects to the jab after he had a direct side effect. And by the way, pulmonary embolisms is one of the adverse consequences of taking the jab. It's not the only one, but it's one of the widely known reported consequences. How is this guy still walking free, honestly? But okay, just we'll have plenty of time to discuss Fauci. We spent 4 hours on him yesterday. How do you lie to us like this? See, to me, that's the issue. That we constantly are being just lied to. Again, I go back to misinformation, disinformation, propaganda. So our medical establishment lies, our media lies, our politicians lie. It's just constant lie after lie after lie after lie. And now it's, there's no such thing as voting fraud. Okay, well, no, there is voting fraud. Okay, well, it doesn't happen often. Okay, well, it does happen often. Okay, but we don't know. We don't know if it's enough to actually change the outcome. Well, okay, on Mamdani, they found 230,000 illegal votes, and the margin of victory was 207,000. So I think that's more than enough now to, that could have been the margin of victory, right? That could have affected that election. That probably stole the election. So what are you going to do now? So you see, they lie, they get caught, they move the goalposts, they lie again, they get caught, they move the goalposts. Now there's nowhere left for them to move the posts. They're stealing at a level where it's undeniable elections are being stolen. And they don't want to report on it because if the American people found out the true extent of the fraud and the election corruption, the SAVE Act, they'd have to pass the SAVE Act. And then it's finito, game over for the Democrats. 617-266-6868. Sid in Middlesex. Thanks for holding, Sid, and welcome.
Bring up is, unfortunately, one you could use on any segment of any show that you do, or how many years you do it. Basically, everything is just the stupidity of the American people. And I mean it, stupid.
Okay. Sid, could you elaborate, my friend?
You ever hear the old saying, a person who stands for nothing will fall for anything?
Yes.
Okay. These people are so preoccupied with other things, their phones, movies, social media, this, that. They don't, you'd be shocked if you ask some people about certain things, and they go, what? Where's that? You taught in college, right?
Yes.
Do they even teach geography anymore in high school or college?
No.
These people don't even know where you're talking about. They don't watch the news. They don't watch, like, the world news. They're good with the local channels, the nonsense, and they probably can't even retain half of that. You know, you take a guy like Arthur from Chestnut Hill. I think he's very well read, and I enjoy listening to him. But when you start talking about, you know, the voting machines, people don't understand that. They don't understand that. People have never had to sacrifice anything. You've got generations that have grown up with no sacrifice, no hardships, no hard jobs. And they say now that people are just being passed along in school, from high school into college. College is passing them along, too, just to get them out of there. The only people is probably like serious high-tech jobs like MIT or something. But when you talk about when they're calling Trump a Nazi or calling Trump Hitler, they don't even, most of these people don't even know who Hitler was. Nazis, they don't know the devastating effects of World War I and World War II. And you could do a tutorial to people about the siege at Stalingrad. Remember that?
Oh, Sid, I got to tell you, you're on fire. And look, you know, I forget what it was. It was when I go on vacation, I like to read, right? I catch up on some of my reading. And I was reading a book, one of the many books I've read, but this was one of the many books I really loved on the Nazis and Hitler. And this one in particular dealt with the early years when he first came to power and what he did, how he began to wipe out his opponents. And even then, the euthanasia, how he went after people who were disabled, obviously the Jews, he was going after them right away. But just in general, when you see everything, the murder, the slaughter, the everything early on. And I just remember I said to Grace, you know, she was reading something else and I'm reading, and I just put my book down and I said, you know, these idiots that keep calling Trump Hitler and a Nazi, they're so historically ignorant. They're so stupid. Exactly. I said your word. I go, it's really unbelievable. I mean, okay, fine. You don't like the guy. You don't vote for him. That's fine. I mean, it's a free country. But to even put Hitler and Trump in the same sentence, to put Nazi and Trump in the same sentence, as you read the list of atrocities, the horrors, and I'm talking 1933, 1934, Sid. You know, I'm not even talking after World War II where they really started to, you know, in Poland, Ukraine, start putting all these Jews in gas ovens and wiping out the Poles and wiping out entire peoples. I'm talking about just in Germany, the first 2 years. And you see the extent that they went to, the barbarism, the savagery. And I'm like, my God, are these people dumb? I mean, they're just dumb. Or they're just that ignorant. And look, I agree with you on every single point here. I have a hard time now motivating my children, motivating my kids to study. Why? Because this is what both my Ashton and Ava tell me. Well, Dad, why should I study? They pass you no matter what. And I'm like, what? She says, yeah, they don't fail you. So if I don't know any math, they just pass me. It doesn't matter what the subject is. So I have to tell them you're going to get punished if you don't get a B, or, you know, I put a certain floor in terms of a grade. But it's getting to the point now, my children are telling me, and they're not lying, their friends have confirmed it. They go, no, we don't fail. Nobody fails. So you're just moved from grade to grade to grade to grade to grade. And Sid, really, we are graduating people from high school who many of them are functionally illiterate and can barely do grade 4, grade 5 math. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's horrible for us to compete with other countries, But even beyond competing with China and all these other countries, that's the future. Those are the future voters. In fact, some of them are the current voters. And it goes right to your point. Like, it's all bread and circuses, like the Roman Empire. It's iPhones, it's movies, it's sports, it's music, but nobody knows a thing about what's going on in their own country, their own government, or what's going on around the world. It's scary. Here, for the 250th anniversary, people were just doing just asking people, so what is America's birthday? They're like, what? Well, yeah, what day, what year? July 4th, 1776. Over 25% of Americans who were asked couldn't get the date and the year. Steve in Sturbridge. Thanks for holding, Steve, and welcome.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for taking the call.
My pleasure.
Long time no hear speak. I'll ask you this question, and then I'll go to the rest of it. Maura Healey's last election, 803, they call it on Channel 5. Did you believe it?
No.
No. Okay, so I can imagine how many truckloads of votes came out that way. Second, if you notice, all right, we got a challenge for the Republicans now. How come no question being asked? And notice he won't ask it. He'll say, we got to do better. Do better? I don't care about better. How about eliminating this sanctuary state? That'd be a winner for the Republicans.
I agree, Steve. I completely agree. And just to go back to your first point, both points are superb. But going back to your first point, it's now come out regarding, I know you're talking about Massachusetts, but it's now come out regarding Mamdani and that fraudulent election. He's clearly illegitimate. They found 100,000 blank ballots that all went for Mamdani. 100,000 blank ballots. Blank, literally blank. And they just counted them as votes for Mamdani. That's now with the election auditors. That's another thing that they found. And I believe they do that in many blue states. I believe they do it here. That's why they give out driver's licenses to illegals. That's the scam. And then register them automatically to vote. And then you have universal mail-in ballots. And then they have all these blank ballots. That's why, you mentioned Maura Healey at 803. I'll never forget Jeff Deal versus Elizabeth Warren. The last time when she ran the last time, and at 8:01, honestly, it wasn't even 8:01. It was 8 o'clock, 30 seconds. And they all announced it for Elizabeth Warren. I'm like, you haven't even counted a vote yet. How's it possible? So I remember it's 8:01. And I called Jeff Deal on the phone. I said, Jeff, what happened? They just called it now. Everyone, all the local channels have now called because they got their info from the Democrats. All the local channels have now called it for Elizabeth Warren. And I remember Jeff Deal said, what? Because he was in, whatever. They were going to start to look at votes coming in. And he said, that's impossible. I don't even think they've counted a single vote. How can they do that? Well, now we know. Now we know. They have such a batch of ballots, fraudulent, illegal ballots, that you need an extra 100, an extra 200, an extra 300, hell, an extra 500, an extra 600,000 votes, so they can pour it on whenever they want. So that's, Chuck Schumer gave the game away. He was asked about the Save America Act, and he said, we can never let it pass. In fact, he said, this is the hill politically we're ready to die on. In other words, we'll throw everything at it. And they said, why? He goes, if it passes, we're going to lose, his words, 16 million votes. So he said the quiet part out loud. They basically have 16 million illegal voters. Whether it's mail-in ballots, whether it's non-citizens, whether it's illegals, whether it's dead people, whatever. But that's the number they have. Now, if we flood the system like we did in 2024 for Trump, we can overcome that 16 million. But, You know, we're basically, we have to scale Mount Everest every time to do it. That's the point. We have to have super maximum turnout. And you just can't get that every election. That's how the Democrats stay close. That's how the Democrats keep blue states. That's how they're on the verge of taking back the House and the Senate. What people don't realize, and Steve, I promise I'll give you the final word. It's not just that they're stealing, say, the presidency under Biden. It's that they don't have nowhere near as many House seats. You know, they shouldn't have nowhere near as many House seats as they do, or as many Senate seats. After Trump's victory in a fair, square election, Republicans should have super majorities in the House and the Senate. That's why they need those fraudulent votes. Even if they don't win, it keeps them in the game. Final word to you, Steve.
Exactly. I was saying that because remember that back in 2020 when that driver talked about hauling a truckload of boats?
Yes.
Okay, you had him. Number two, Mikey Sherrill is scared because just like you said in your previous, talking today, you take the Lion. They're saying 6,000. Any 6,000. It's probably more like you and I are thinking truckloads that they found out and never does. And how how many since they controlled the electronic election.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other thing. They can switch with the voting machines. See, that's another scam they have running. Okay, the Save America Act now hangs in the balance. A group of Republican senators led by Senator Mike Lee are trying to do everything in their power to force Senate Majority Leader John Thune to not go to recess. In other words, to keep the Senate in session and not go on a 6-week vacation where they will not be back until the middle of September. By then, it's too late to pass the SAVE Act to have any effect before the midterm elections. So, Mike Lee is now being joined by about, I believe it's now 11 Republican senators who are saying, no, we don't want to go on vacation. Keep the Senate in session. Let's keep working throughout the month of August if we have to, but get the SAVE Act passed. My question to you, will it get passed? Trump is putting maximum pressure on Thune. He's called him. He's spoken to him. He's on Truth Social. He's urging Republicans to not leave D.C., not go to recess, and get it passed no matter what. Will Trump prevail, or will the swamp win again? 617-266-6868. You can text the Kuhner Man, 70470, 70470. This is from Paulie on Messenger. And I think the analogy is so perfect to how the Democrats cheat and their system of voter fraud and corruption, this machine of fraud that they have now built in state after state. Jeff, when I was younger, I had a friend who was much better at me at sports. So he would give me a 10-point lead up to 11 on one-on-one basketball. Most of the time, he would win. This is just like what's happening with the votes. They have a big cushion, and they know they're going to win. We need to stop this. Bingo. Bingo. You know, you play to 11. If you know, one-on-one basketball, a basket is just 1 point. So basically, they're up 10-0 before we even start the game. That's the cushion that they have. So basically, to win an election like, say, 2024, you've got to be perfect. Like, as Trump said when he came on the show, he said, listen, we know where they're going to try to cheat. We're going to block them off. Then we're going to win the popular vote. We're going to win every single swing state. Thread the needle. Run the table. So we win the popular vote. We win every swing state. Then we win the electoral college vote. We swamp the system. that's how you overcome their voting fraud machine. Okay, it was a brilliant campaign, don't get me wrong. But, that's not free competition. That's not free and fair. You're always up against the odds. You're always up, you're always down 10-0. And all they got to do is just score one basket, and that's it. It's over. So that's why they don't want to pass the Save America Act. Because, as Chuck Schumer said, that's 16 million illegal votes gone. So can you imagine if we actually had free and fair elections? It would be a very different Senate, a very different House, very different governorships, very different state legislatures, very different local elections, mayors. It would be a radically different country. And it also explains something else. Why is socialism rising? Why is now the radical left completely taking over the Democratic Party? By the way, there is a study out. Okay, a study. 4% of DSA members are actually blue-collar workers. 4%. So all this is for the working class, the so-called proletariat, but only 4% of their membership are actual working class people. The rest are all college graduates or people with professional jobs or in white-collar jobs. So you have to ask yourself, well, you claim to speak for the working class, but none of you come from the working class. Your base is not even working class or blue collar. And it's what somebody touched on earlier, the dumbing down of America. You just, you don't have to have good grades. You don't have to even pass. They just move you along. They move you along in high school, then they move you into college. And what do they do in college? They indoctrinate you. They brainwash you. So listen now to this, because it's all tied together. If I have so much voting fraud, then I don't even really need to be accountable to voters. I can push the most extreme left-wing Marxist, socialist, communist policies over and over and not care, because it doesn't matter what the voters think. We've got so many illegal voters and illegal votes we can count on. So now there's no accountability to the Democratic Party. They don't have to be a responsible party. They don't have to have something that connects with ordinary voters. They don't have to be part of the mainstream. They can keep going further and further and further to the left and get away with it because they have that voting machine, that corrupt voting fraud machine, and they just keep winning elections. A la Mamdani. He stole the election. So what does he care? Yeah, abolish ICE. Yeah, sanctuary city. Yeah, everything free. Yeah, Intifada. Yeah, I'm Hamas. Yeah, Sharia law. And you're like, this guy's crazy. It doesn't matter. He's got all the illegals he needs to put him over the top. Now, to see how extreme the DSA is, and this is what's taking over now the Democratic Party. Okay, it's all tied together. You have a massive base of illegal voters and people who are indoctrinated in Marxist and socialist college campuses. It's a lethal, dangerous mix. This is what you end up getting. Listen now to this. If I said it, you wouldn't believe it. You'd say it's impossible. Nobody can possibly believe this. Here it is. This is pure Bolshevism. This is pure Marxism. You don't believe me? Okay. This is the national co-chair of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, Megan Romer. She's on with Shannon Bream on Fox. And Shannon Bream has got she's got a box on her, as she's talking on her left, and it just lays out the platform of the Democratic Socialists of America. Just their party platform. And she's like, do you guys really believe this? Listen now to Romer's response. Roll cut 100, Mike.
Okay, so we're going to put up on the screen a few of the things that are part of your platform, and I want to ask you, just give me sort of a true or false on these. Abolish the Senate.
True.
Okay, replace the presidency and Supreme Court as we now know them.
Yep.
Abolish ICE.
Absolutely.
Abolish borders and give amnesty to anyone currently in the U.S. illegally.
As a long-term plan, yep.
Defund the Pentagon.
Absolutely.
Abolish prisons, at least in large part.
Yeah, again, that as part of a long-term program, yeah.
Okay, so no prisons. Government or public ownership of most large corporations.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, it goes on. No, it goes on. Abolish police. Oh, yeah. So no borders. Yeah, no borders. I'm telling you. It goes on. How about private property? Yeah, no, we'll get rid of that. Yeah, well, that's coming. Yeah. Now, that's full-throated communism. That's full-throated Marxism. Now, their goal is clearly to destroy the United States. Now, let me just make one final point, and then I want to go to the phone lines. This is death and destruction and decay. That's what this is. This is overthrow the entire free market system, nationalize most of the country, nationalize businesses, or eventually expropriate, take people's private property, your home, whatever you own. There's not going to be no police. No criminals go to jail. There's no prisons. There's no border. That means billions can come in and we put them all on welfare. Amnesty for every single illegal alien. Now, abolish the Senate. Make the Supreme Court and the presidency subservient to the legislative branch. In other words, destroy our very constitutional order. Remember, our system, our constitution is based on checks and balances and separation of powers. They want to undo everything that our founding fathers created at the Constitutional Convention in 1787. So they're openly calling for a Marxist communist overthrow. Okay, super quick because I want to go to Ken in Weymouth. This is from Larry on Messenger. Jeff, it's even more basic than what you just explained. If the elections weren't rigged, the left and the Democrats would actually have to explain their radical agenda and let voters decide if they want that kind of crazy. Bingo. You're completely right. But to me, it's another reason why socialism is surging. Who's going to stop them when you have all these illegal votes and all this mass cheating going on? So you see, you're not even accountable anymore. So you can actually be more irresponsible, more crazy, more extreme, not less, more. Ken in Weymouth. Thanks for holding, Ken, and welcome.
Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Ken?
Couple of points. I'll say this in the beginning. If you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. Keep this name in mind because there's an excellent book out, and I read it, and she was a communist who came back into the church, but during the 20s and 30s, she infiltrated all our institutions. Look her up. Bella Dodd, D-O-D-D. True story. She even testified before Congress in 1948. What I want to get at is, it seems we always get the presidency, we get the House, we get the Senate, we're all set, and there's always somebody, isn't there, that's the head of the Senate or even the House. We get moving. Boehner, McCarthy, McConnell, it doesn't matter. Take your pick, okay? And it seems we make headway, and then all of a sudden we always blow it, don't we? And we always got the assumption that as long as we got the president there, he's going to change everything. And what I'm getting at is this stuff has been in our institutions basically indoctrinating us through the education system, through the media, just through it all. The deep state, the CIA. I mean, I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but this is where we are. And then what happens? Well, they saw some January 6 patriots actually stand up. So they had to make a spectacle out of them to basically scare the public. You want to try to rise up? We're going to lock your butt up in freaking prison. You'll never see the light of day. Because right now we're in a cold civil war, and I think they're just waiting for a hot one. And the other thing is, if we know the machines are all basically corrupt, why don't we just throw them out? Why is it every single institution, FBI, CIA, you name it, they never seem to do it? And we have a crime called treason. And really, there's low treason, high treason. Low treason is when you give aid to your friend. High treason is when you give aid to your enemy. Let's face it, China's all over this. Okay, Venezuela was all over this because they're all communist, Marxist controlled. We just sit back and say, what are you going to do? We should get rid of Thune. Say, listen, you stay in session. We got 11 senators that says we're going to do this. Well, how come we had the same problem with McCarthy, same problem with Boehner, and what happened? We just got the same damn crap. Look, you want your property taken away? You want this? We got 500 million guns in this country. What are they waiting for? I'd like an answer. I mean, we can all
Ken, you've laid it out, I think, beautifully. And let's just connect the dots because you've laid out all the dots and you've laid them up really well. It's very obvious, just objectively. Look, there's now evidence, it's irrefutable, that China was blackmailing Joe Biden and his family while he was president. That's all come out. It's come out now that China infiltrated our voting system, that China got over 220 million Americans, registered voters, all of our voter data. So, and we know 2020 was stolen. And the Democrats colluded directly with China. So, let's be honest. China owns the Democratic Party. China has already owned one president of the United States. They own most of Congress. They own much of the media. They've made deep inroads into social media, TikTok and other places. They've made very deep inroads into Hollywood. It is very similar to what the Soviets did in the 20s, 30s, and 40s until they were outed and exposed by Joseph McCarthy. That's why, if you want to understand the history books, that's why the left has always been determined to destroy and crush McCarthy, to turn his very name, McCarthyism, into a dirty word. Because McCarthy was a patriot. McCarthy was right on most issues. Not every single one, but on most. He was a principled patriot and a principled anti-communist. And if you look at the people that he named, 99% of them were subversives, communist fellow travelers, or outright agents of the Soviet Union. There's no question about it. So, instead of now the Soviet threat, we face, to me, even a greater threat, which is the communist threat. And they have now subverted our country. They've subverted our government. Now, as for the Republican Party, which is supposed to be the party that stands against this, it's not that McCarthy or Thune or Boehner or McConnell, it's not as if they're actual communist agents, but that they don't need to be. They have the Democrats for that. They have the left for that. The media, if you want, we've got the names now. We've got the names of all of the journalists who are on the CCP payroll. They're journalists from the Chicago Tribune, the Los Angeles Times, the Associated Press, Reuters, New York Times, Washington Post, Vox. It's a who's who. CNN, then called MSNBC, now MS Now, NBC. You look at the list. It is every major media outlet, Bloomberg, by the way, CNBC. So they are on the payroll of the Chinese Communist Party. If you want, I'll give you their names. You've never heard of these people. But they're reporters, they're editors, and they all wrote puff pieces, propaganda pieces on China, and in particular, attacking Trump for daring to stand up to China. So our media is bought and paid for and co-opted by the communist Chinese. We have the money, we have the receipts, we have the checks. Now, all the Chinese have to do, it goes back, it's biblical. Forget your country. You want to betray the Son of God? You want to betray the Son of Man? Again, for us, 30 pieces of silver, we think that's nothing. No, I'm telling you, at the time, it's the equivalent of tens of millions of dollars. It was a lot of money. You just pour pieces of silver on the table and say, tell me when you want me to stop. That's what they did to McConnell through his wife with her business that was tied to China. $80 million. That was his price. Thune, it looks like he's going to go for $100 million. He's a little bit more of a high-class call girl. Little more of a prostitute. Boehner, he sold himself cheap, but he sold himself. McCarthy, he's another one, sold himself. And by the way, everyone talks about the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce says their biggest potential market, their biggest issue outside of open borders and illegal immigration is what? Free trade with China. The Chamber of Commerce is owned by the communist Chinese. So, and the Chinese are smart. They use the Chamber of Commerce as sort of their middleman to bribe top Republicans. So that's how the fraudulent system works. So the Chinese Communist Party are buying influence, and they have bought now the commanding heights of culture, politics, and government in the United States. And then Ken mentions, well, there's a lot of us with guns. Yes. And let me lay it out. If a communist wins in 2028, and right now the leading contender for the Democratic presidential nomination, president, is Alexandria Fidel Castro Cortez. She's a member of the DSA. She's a hardcore Marxist-Leninist. She openly says, I want Cuba and Venezuela here in America. She's on the record. Okay? This is Bernie's gal. Now, everybody knows you elect a communist and you have an attempted communist takeover of the United States, it will lead to either the breakup of the country, states will secede, red states will leave, or, God forbid, you will have a civil war. Now, I don't care if it's door 1 or if it's door 2. You're sitting in the Politburo in China. You're Xi Jinping or one of his henchmen. Do you really care? To crystallize it for all of you, if you were in the Kremlin during the Cold War, in the Politburo, say sitting around Brezhnev, and they go, comrade, look, America on the verge of communist revolution. Wow, really? Well, he looks like he's going to lead to breakup of country or maybe civil war. You think, what do you think as a communist? As a what do you say? Yeah, party, bring the vodka, Yuri, it's time to celebrate, baby. You don't care. If the United States breaks up and disintegrates, I win. If the United States goes and gets engulfed in a civil war, I win. Either way, I win. Because the major obstacle to us achieving global control and global hegemony, global power, is the United States. So as long as it falls from within, I don't care if it's through secession, I don't care if it's through internal chaos, I don't care if it's through civil war, I don't care how it's done, as long as it's done. And I believe that's the ultimate end goal. It's clear. And let me just say one final thing. Don't you feel, and just before I say this, the World Economic Forum, which is another cat's paw of Communist China, they're tightly aligned with Communist China. The World Economic Forum and all these globalist oligarchs that are there, and who have now essentially made a bet that America is the past and China is the future. So they've sold their soul to China. The Economic Forum has laid out, it's all public record, their list of goals. And, one of them is, in America and in the West, you will own nothing, meaning ordinary people, and you will be happy to own nothing. You'll be happy to own nothing. Another thing they're pushing very, very hard, is they say by 2030, Western values must be destroyed. That's straight from the World Economic Forum. Western values must be destroyed. They don't say Chinese values. They don't say African values. They don't say Middle Eastern or Muslim values. They say Western values. Why? Why? And again, to me, the answer is self-evident. Because the only thing now that stands in their way is the West. If the West falls, China becomes supreme. It's the ultimate in the red-green alliance. Communist red joins forces with green Islam. And so, and what is the beacon, the foundation of the West? It's now the United States of America. And don't you feel, I feel it every day. Every institution is always constantly under attack or under assault. The universities, schools, public schools, entertainment, our government, patriotism, religion, the family, everything that holds us together is under constant, nonstop attack. Okay, we finally made contact. Dr. Grace putting liberals in their place. Grace, we're having a hard time getting you, but we finally got you. Grace, I've got Grace Vuoto, by the way, my wonderful wife, my better half. Grace, Mamdani's been caught. Fraudulent votes, 230,000, and could be a lot more. My question to you, do we have an illegitimate mayor in New York City? And is this the reason why, among others, that the Democrats now do not want to pass the SAVE Act? Because their entire power depends upon voter fraud and stolen elections. What say you?
Oh, Jeff, listen, I think it's crystal clear. One of my fantasies is just once, could we do the elections the old-fashioned way and see the result, where it's a paper ballot, same-day voting only, and the results are delivered that day? What would the country look like if we could do that only once? And you nailed it, as have your brilliant callers, Jeff. Our institutions, they are all under attack. And what's amazing is, a few months ago, you might say, okay, maybe the Senate Majority Leader, June, has some kind of a case to make by not wanting to blow past the filibuster, that he wants to preserve the Constitution. But now, with what the DSA wants to do, they want to put the Constitution on fire. They want to light it on fire. And so you're trying to preserve the filibuster when they want to blow up the whole thing? It just doesn't make sense. And also how lazy they are. Of course they should stay beyond the recess. They don't work that many days. The Senate has only been in session for 100 days through to the end of June, according to the tallies that we have. That's not a lot of days. They could certainly stay there and get this done.
Sweetheart, I'm sorry, Grace, that's 3 months.
That's 3 months. Their goal is to be in session 158 days for the year. They've only been there 100 days. The House, only 90 days. That's it. What do they need a recess from? What do they need a recess from?
Sorry, either you laugh or you cry. I mean, boy, you and I should run for Congress, huh? What do you think? What a gig. What a gig.
I mean, Jeff, it's like they're taking a vacation from a vacation. What are you breaking from? You're breaking from what? What work do you need a break from?
All right, Grace, the SAVE Act. Let me ask you, do you think they'll pass it? I know you think they should pass it. You're a big supporter of the SAVE Act. But will they somehow manage to force the Senate to pass it? What do you think?
I don't know. I am just skeptical. Look, DeSantis has come out saying he did it in Florida. He passed a similar bill in Florida. It's really not that hard. But what we're seeing is the will just is not there. They don't want to do this. I think this is clearly sabotage. It's not such a hard bill to pass. I think we've passed much more difficult legislation. If you think about it, what we passed for the economy, the big beautiful bill, that was much more difficult to get done, and still somehow we managed to get it done. This is a cakewalk compared to that bill. So what that tells me is that the will simply is not there, and this is sabotage of the MAGA agenda.
Grace, we've got about a minute left. We know why the Democrats are opposed to it, because they cheat and they steal. So that's the basis of their power. But what do you think explains Thune, Murkowski, Collins, Mitch McConnell, the rhinos that are holding out and refuse to pass the SAVE Act, even though their overwhelming majority of their constituents and voters want it? What's your theory?
Well, Jeff, I think each individually, they're swamp creatures. They are swamp creatures. If you analyze their wealth has expanded exponentially. And that means they're not doing the bidding of the constituents. They're not doing the bidding of the majority of the constituents. They're not even there to defend the Constitution. This is an emergency. They are just bought and paid for. They're doing whatever a specific corporation or donor is telling them to do. And we've seen our entire system is being eroded by this kind of corruption, where the people who are elected, they don't say no to the bribes, to the trappings of money, of power. They don't just stand firm.
Grace, I mean, you know the Bible better than I do, obviously. But, when Judas took his 30 pieces of silver, he wanted to return it after, they captured Christ and they were going to crucify him. And in shame, he throws back, he gives back the 30 pieces, and then he hung himself out of shame. Tim in South Dennis. Thanks for holding, Tim, and welcome.
Jeff, my friend, as always, I love you in a non-sexual manner.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
Tim, what's on your mind, my friend?
Well, maybe a slightly different take, but I mean, you got to kind of ask yourself, are people either so incredibly stupid or they just want to be communists? And on the Democrat socialist left, of course, we know that's true, but they're not really the majority. So how come the rest of the people are going for this, even though the ones that are not like that hold the majority in the House and the Senate? And I think a lot of what's happened is that we, the people, have kind of lost sight of what our representatives are supposed to do down there. I think a lot of them get down there and get the idea their job isn't to represent that, hey, here's our community, our state, whatever level. Here's what we want, here's what we believe in. I think they get down there and think, well, now that I'm here, it's my job to just think for everybody. I don't think they worry about, hey, if we don't come through with what we said we're going to do, no one's voting us out of office. When people come across some of these guys running, like look right here in Massachusetts, at Brian Shortsleeve. I met him once. I know he's been on your show. He walked around where I was and everyone, oh, great, yeah, you doing? You're the man. I right away started asking them tough questions because there's certain things I want to know if you're going to go be the voice of the people. And I think even if they tell you what they think you want to hear, they should be told by the people, hey, look, okay, but know this, if you don't come through like we expect you to, we'll have no problem voting you out of there. I mean, there have been some people, not knocking older people, we're all on that train, but I mean, there are some people down there that are so old. I mean, I'm 58 now. I know maybe you're a year or two behind me. When they first got there, we were just little kids learning numbers, arithmetic, all that stuff. And it's like, here we are, 50-plus years later. They're still there. I mean, when you saw Dianne Feinstein rolled out looking like Norman Bates' mother in that movie Psycho with the young woman going, just say yay, just say yay. I mean, they could have been voting about whether to turn the toilet paper up or down in the bathrooms. She had no idea.
Oh, you're dead on. Tim, you are absolutely dead on. Look, it's Mitch McConnell now. It was Joe Biden when he was president. Hell, it was Joe Biden. Look, I got clips. I'm going to use them, I promise. The tapes came out of the interviews that he gave to his ghostwriter. And this is while he was either vice president or just after the vice presidency. So we're talking 2016, 2017, 3-4 years before he's installed as president. I want to stress that, Tim. Years before he was installed as president. Well, now I know why they fought like crazy to try to keep it out of the public domain. You listen to him, you go, he's gone. I mean, he's got, you mentioned, Norman Bates' mother. I mean, that was Norman Bates' father. This is 3-4 years before he's president. He can't remember anything. 30, 40, 50-second pauses. And then he pulls out documents in a package which says top secret classified. He even says it. He goes, so as you can see, this is classified. I got it from my basement. He even says it. I'm not allowed to have this. I shouldn't have this. Remember, he was vice president. He doesn't have the right to declassify anything. And he says, no, this was in my basement, and here you go, and maybe you should turn the recorder off now. Like I'm going to play you the cuts. I don't know when, probably Friday, but whenever I do, you're going to be shocked. First, you're going to say, how is this guy not in jail? That's number one. And number two, he was gone. Cognitively, mentally gone. Okay? He was practically a vegetable. And that's 3-4 years before they made him, installed him as president. So this is who we have running our country. And people wonder why we're a mess. But I want to get to the heart of the matter, Tim, because you mentioned it. And I think you're right. Why are all these politicians so bought and paid for? Why are they all, or the overwhelming majority, to be fair, why are so many of them corrupt and out of touch and think that this is a lifetime appointment and that there are overlords? They don't, represent us. They can, wield power over us. I think the answer is we're a republic in name only. We're like the Roman Empire, and Washington is the new Rome. When you look at the trillions, and I mean trillions with the T, dollars flowing around there, the power that you can now amass, the privilege, all of the temptations, sex, men, women, children, I hate to say it, drugs, you name it, everything under the sun. I think for most people, human nature being what it is, the temptation is just too great. And maybe you initially fight off the temptation. Okay, you can text the Kuhner Man, 70470. This is from 603. And this is a very famous quote by Irish thinker, philosopher, really one of the greatest conservatives ever, Edmund Burke. Quote, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." And of course, this is from famous Irish conservative Edmund Burke. Jeff, this communist overthrow only continues to gain ground through subversion and fraud because the people who have been charged with the responsibility of enforcing the Constitution on behalf of the citizenry do little to nothing to stop it. If we saw politicians and their minions spending life in prison for engaging in election fraud and communist subversives receiving the death penalty for treason, this would all come to an end. Not in our lifetimes, but in less than a couple short years. Laws without enforcement are nothing more than inconsequential words on paper. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. If these corrupt politicians actually went to jail for election fraud, or if these communist subversives actually received the death penalty for their crimes, the texter is 1,000% correct. I'm not saying within 20, 30, 40 years. Within 2 to 3 years, this would all get cleaned up. And you're right. You can have all the laws on the books you want. But if they're not enforced, then they're just basically, inconsequential, meaningless words on paper. And that's the problem that we now have. Does the Constitution mean what it says? Or is it just a meaningless piece of paper? For me, as a naturalized American citizen, I swore and took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution from enemies, foreign and domestic. For me, I live by that oath. This oath is almost what defines me. And sadly, especially for those on the left, for Democrats, and now increasingly for many Americans, because, as one of the callers said, it's bread and circuses. It's, entertainment, it's movies, it's iPhones, it's social media, it's, I don't think they can even name you three, in the Bill of Rights, 3 of the amendments to the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. I don't think forget all 10. Just ask them to name you 3. 3 amendments, and they can't. I'm telling you, they can't. So that's the problem that we have. Agree, disagree. Paul in Boston. Thanks for holding, Paul, and welcome.
Sorry, Jeff.
Go ahead, Paul.
Jeff, first of all, I don't want to get off subject like you said earlier, with the Fauci thing, but I have something to comment on that. But with the COVID and the all this stuff is all tied together, Jeff. I mean, we know it. The elections, the mail-in, the fraudulent balloting. It was all by design. And I just want to say that the mail-in balloting, if we just put one thing, says no more mail-in balloting, instead of all this ID, proof of ID. I mean, that's good. We should have that. But it's this mail-in balloting I suspect is the culprit. But this whole thing it all started with the COVID and China. And I believe that Fauci testifying this afternoon, they're going to come after him. Rand Paul is going to attack him with some facts and figures. He's just going to say, well, we didn't know at the time. He's going to come up with all that stuff. He's going to tap dance his way out of this. He didn't break any laws. If any laws were broken, unethical, immoral, this guy is a bad person. but he's not going to jail. I think he should be. No, he's the face of COVID, and they couldn't have done it without him in China. And I said this before, Jeff. I've called on your show, and I know I raise a few eyebrows when I do. I say that all the stuff that we have, the emails, the proof of this, that, and the other, the world, the Eco Health Alliance, the funding. I think all that's a ruse, Jeff. I think that was designed to make us off the track, to get us. I think China volunteered to be the scapegoat, but not really. Didn't admit that was because there's no way to investigate it. There's no way you're going to do anything in China. That's why China was in on it with the World Health Organization, with our own Democrat Party. They were all, and I'm telling you right now, this gain of function research was going on right here in our own backyard. Pfizer, of course, they called it controlled evolution, if you remember the Project Veritas interview. All you have to do is take these pathogens, which they have millions and millions of copies in every freezer, in every in every Institute of Virology, every NIH, and you get that, and you, I don't know, maybe put it, and that's where I get a little conspiratorial, but all you have to do is put it in a pharmaceutical product and ship it out to certain nursing homes, like Kirkland Nursing Home in Seattle, Elmhurst Hospital in Queens, Milan, Italy, all these places. It's not going to be that hard, and then eventually, that's the pure COVID. That'll kill you, probably, if you have comorbidities. But you could spread it, but then it's already degraded by the time it spreads to a nurse or somebody. And yeah, it's dangerous. No, it's not good. But I'm telling you right now, this whole thing with going after Wuhan and going after Fauci, even though he is the face of it, that is the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, no question. No, Paul, listen, you're right. You're right. I'm telling you, as I like to say, you're not 100, you're 1,000% correct. And just two very quick points. All of you, you really need to know this. In Fauci's diary, there are so many shocking revelations. But one of them, and this is irrefutable, and I'm telling you, he won't refute it, he can't refute it, is he admits in the diary that the COVID-19, the coronavirus, was created and developed and leaked from the lab in Wuhan. He admits it never came from a wet market. They call it the natural origins theory. In other words, it never came from an animal. Okay, a bat, a monkey, a rat, whatever. So he admits in private what he lied about in public. In public, he said, oh, it was a wet market. So the question is why? Why? Why would you lie? Why would you not admit that it came from a lab leak? Two reasons. Number one, Fauci was funding it. And he was funding it for many years using middlemen and other entities, Eco Health Alliance and others. But he approved and authorized millions and millions of this very dangerous gain of function research. So he had to cover for himself. But number two, if this came from a lab in Wuhan, then that means the Chinese Communist Party would be held directly responsible. And that Fauci could not have. Now, the second point, so it's all roads lead to China. Now, there is a CIA whistleblower who has come out and really blown the whistle on this. He worked high up in the CIA. And I'm going to try to get him on the show. But let me tell you now what he has testified to. And this is why they have Fauci 6 ways to Sunday. He came out and said that the CIA's top intelligence analysts said without a shadow of a doubt, and this was within 6 months of 2020. So remember, kind of January, February is when COVID-19 kind of hits our country. And then we start getting these lockdowns, 2 weeks, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, all of that. So we're now in about June of 2020. And the CIA's top analysts say this came from a lab in Wuhan, 1,000%, guaranteed. Okay, we have the evidence, we have the facts, we have the sources, we have the witnesses, we've got everything. We've got absolutely everything. The only question is, was it leaked deliberately or was it an accidental leak? Okay, that's the only debate. But that it came from the lab, guaranteed. It never came from a wet market. Fauci goes to the top intelligence analyst. In fact, he even goes above their head and says, I need you to kill that conclusion, to bury it, to suppress it. Why? Because A, it'll implicate me. It'll implicate other people in the medical health establishment. And B, he says it's going to lay everything at the feet of communist China, and this is going to help Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump is going to use this and say, you see, we're being attacked by China. Because remember, Trump's first term, it was all about him standing up to the Chi-Coms. And the media and the Democrats were siding with China against Trump. Well, what do you think the American people, what their reaction would be if they said, my God, they just released essentially a bioweapon into the world and onto the United States? I mean, Trump would surge to a landslide victory. So the deep state, and he said, I witnessed this, the whistleblower, they deliberately changed their conclusion and their findings in order to undermine Trump, protect Fauci, and coddle and shield communist China. And here's the kicker. Many of those top intelligence analysts, to their credit, many of them were patriots. They were patriots. And they said, but this is not true. We know it's not true. You know it's not true. And so they tried to get this information to the director of the CIA, to get it out to the media, to disseminate it, to say, look, we're being lied to. Lines are blazing. Russ in Rochester. Thanks for holding, Russ, and welcome.
Good morning, Jeff. How are you today?
Very good. How are you, Russ?
Good. I want to put a little spin on the Save America Act. I don't think it's going to pass. And I know it looks like Trump is going after it, but I think that's smoke and mirrors, and I'll tell you why. And, you can agree or disagree with me. He knows that if they pass the Save America Act, what's the first thing the Democrats are going to do? They're going to tie it up in court with appeals. And it'll never go into effect, even if it, if they pass it and it finally gets to the Supreme Court or wherever it has to go, it'll be too late for the midterms. I think what Trump's going to do, and I'm convinced of this, he knows that it's not going to pass. And even if it does, it's going to be a problem because they're going to hold it up. He's got enough evidence with all the voter fraud and, of course, the Save America Act not passing. He's going to implement a national emergency act of voter fraud. And that way the courts can't get involved in it because it's a national emergency act. What do you say, Jeff?
I don't know, Russ. I have to be honest with you. I don't know what he's going to do if they don't pass the Save America Act. He would have the right to invoke a national emergency because I think it is a national emergency. I don't know, though, if he would do it because his advisors would probably tell him you're playing into Democrat hands in terms of trying to portray you as a dictator, that you're trying to steal the elections, that you're trying to rig the midterms. You're a dictator. So, this is why you've got to now, change the voting rules just before the midterms. So I don't know if he's willing to risk that or not. My fear, Russ, is no matter what happens, the Democrats will steal the election in November. That they've been emboldened again, that they're getting away with it. And they got away with it with that mayoral race in California. They got away with it now, it appears, with Mamdani. They got away with it in New Jersey. And they think maybe they'll get away with it again. And I think that Trump is not going to accept it. I think that Trump is going to call him out and say the midterms were stolen and say the Democrats sweep back to power, then we're going to have a constitutional crisis. So that's why I'm urging everybody, let's take it out of the hands of the Democrats and swamp the polls the way we did in 2024. If we all go and vote, if we all swamp the polls, yeah, they're going to cheat, but they can't cheat that much because then you're going to have a problem, which is you're going to have more people voting than are registered or eligible to vote. That's why the Democrats essentially have that 16 million. That's their kind of outer limit. That's what Schumer is petrified of if they pass the SAVE Act. Because in an interview, he said, we're going to lose 16 million votes. So that's their maximum that they can cheat. You go anything beyond that, you're in big trouble. Because then the country's going to say, well, no, mathematics proves you got massive voter fraud. Just the math. So my fear, Russ, is that it's going to be a combination of the Democrats stealing and Republicans or conservatives or Trump supporters not voting Democrat, obviously, but just staying home. And then we're in trouble because you look at these communists that they are now lining up, these DSA socialists. And Russ, I got to tell you, we're going to be in a world of trouble. Now, I do think Trump has a very, very big ace up his sleeve. And that is just how radical, how insane, how extreme these DSA Democrats are. And many, many independents are saying they will never vote for the Democrats on any kind of a DSA ticket. So, you know, it may be that the Democrats have become so far to the left, so out of the mainstream, that even many independents are just going to stay home. And if that happens, then there may not be a blue wave. So, I mean, we'll see what happens, Russ. But right now, the Democrats are in a civil war. They're being taken over by the communist Hamas wing. And this Democrat, this communist Hamas wing is devouring the Democratic Party. And I'm telling you, there's no way in hell that this country would ever vote for a communist revolution. So if they tell us that on November 3rd, I believe, is the election this year. If this is what the media tries to tell us, no one is going to believe them. No one is going to believe them. And I think you're going to then have a serious crisis. So that's why let's take it out of their hands. Let's vote. Let's vote like we did in 2024 and give President Trump another 2 years to really finish his agenda and his mandate. But, we'll see. I mean, we'll see. We're right now we're 100 days away from the midterms. So basically now the elections have pretty much now kicked off.